All right, guys. So you filed FL-100 and FL-110 as well as AGR form. And now you're finding someone other than you, over 18, to serve it to the other side. There are two types of service. I prefer the first type, which is personal service. So the process server takes the paperwork with a stamp, with a case number, with a blank FL-120, and goes and serves your spouse. And that date will be the determining date for the cooling off period, 6 months and 1 day. I'm saying in like this because you still can do all kinds of work in this 6 months. You just can be single for 6 months and 1 day after you serve the other side. The second type of service is by mail. And this is in pure uncontested case. So again, someone other than you, over 18, puts this package, FL-100, FL-110, AGR form, blank FL-120, or not 120 if you know it's going to be a default, into an envelope, sends it out to your spouse, and your spouse will sign a form acknowledging the receipt. And from that point on, from the day the receipt of these paperwork is acknowledged, the 6 months and 1 day period begins. Now, let's say the person who is over 18 is not a professional process server. If they are, they still need to fill out FL-115 and file it with the court. If it's your friend over 18 who does that, then here is how you're going to fill out this form for your friend. I'm going to screen share. So this is the form. Let's go line by line. So here you will fill out your name. You fill this out the same way you filled out FL-100. So imagine you fill this out, petitioner, respondent. Now you have a case number because you're serving a document that has been filed. And click the following options. You click family law petition, marriage dissolution partnership, FL-100 that we already filled out and got a case number, FL-110, FL-120. Now, if this is not a divorce, then you fill out the other boxes. If you are going for default, then you will fill out these boxes here, D1 to whatever applies to you. If you want to create a default, meaning the other side is not going to respond, and you just serve them the paperwork upon which you're going to base your judgment package on. Now here, address where served is the address of your spouse or wherever they were served, Starbucks. You can call them up and agree on an address they're going to be available to be served. And personal service on the date and time. I don't use substituted service because usually it applies to companies. For example, if your spouse has a company and has a representative receptionist and they accept service on their behalf, that's when you would fill out substituted service. Mail. So if someone else sends the package by mail, then you would be checking this on that date, which when the package was sent out, city, and then you send 2 copies of one FL-117, one for the spouse to keep and one for you to return. And then you need to prepare an envelope, return envelope. So when your spouse signs it, they just put it in an envelope, drop it off. So it's easy for them, including they send you back the signed FL-117. Now, if your spouse is outside of California, we have all kinds of problems because of the jurisdiction issue. But let's say if they, in cases where they're outside of California and have no contact to California, I suggest that even though they sign FL-117 and you file this form and, the address outside of California is going to be adding 20 days. And you need to attach to this form a return receipt or other evidence of actual delivery. So usually what I do is FedEx, and then they will have to sign the package acknowledging the receipt, and then you download that from FedEx online, and then that will be acceptable. But the point is, if they're outside of California, I always recommend against default because the court might reject jurisdiction, so they have no minimum contact to California. Then you have them file for response, FL-120, because then the court will have personal jurisdiction over them and will make orders such as uncontested judgment. And then person who served papers, your friend, where they live, their phone number. And then since they're not going to be professional process server, they will say exempt from not a registered California process server. Or if it's a registered process server, then they would fill this out. They always have to declare under penalty of perjury, no matter what you click here. Let's say it's going to be this, then that. And then they need to date, put their name, and sign. So now let's look at if you did service by mail. You fill out, this is FL-117, right? So if it was by mail, then you have that new file, FL-115. Check off the box FL-117, attach that to FL-115, and then attach, if it's outside of California, evidence that the other person received it. So I'm going to skip this part because you know how to fill it out already. And then the documents identified below are being served on you by mail with this acknowledgement form. You must personally sign or person authorized must sign acknowledging the receipt. If the documents described below include a summons, which we have, which is FL-110, and you fail to complete and return this acknowledgement from the sender within 20 days from the date of mailing, which we will have here, date of mailing, you will be liable for the reasonable expenses incurred after the date of serving you or attempting to serve you with these documents. Basically, if you don't sign it, the other person will have to hire a process server and they will incur cost to hire a process server and you will be responsible for the cost. If you return this form to the sender, service of summons is deemed complete on the date you signed the acknowledgement of receipt, meaning the 6 months and 1 day starts ticking. This is not an answer to the action, so it's just acknowledging that you received the paperwork. If you don't agree with what being required, you must submit a form called response, FL-120, within 30 calendar days from the date you signed this. So date of mailing is going to be the process server, your friend, who is going to sign here. Of course, don't forget number 1, name of the who has been served. The process server's name or your friend's name, signature of sender must be not a party, so not who filed, but someone else over 18. And then check off boxes. Usually it's for A, what documents have been served. And then you, the recipient, needs to sign this specified date where you're going to sign this because it's going to start the 6 months and 1 day clock ticking. Then you put your name, signature, and that's it. So in this video, we learned that these forms need to be filed as part of the divorce process. So we have step 1, get your case number. Step 2, show that your case number is now delivered to the other side, which makes them responsible for ATROS, automatic restraining order. So when you file it affects you, and when they received it, it affects them. Meaning, if you look at the form FL-110, you cannot transfer, encumber separate property. You cannot remove children out of California. You cannot do anything without other person's consent unless it's for living expenses and attorney's fees. So when you file, there is an automatic restraining order. When you receive it, it applies to you too. So this is official. Now the service is complete when you file it with the court.